Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have a full review of the CMF Watch Pro 2. Let's get started. This smartwatch from CMF is a really interesting proposition. It has some different factors with respect to the vast majority of smartwatches on the market, so that's worthy of recognition. But before we continue, let me tell you about its price. In Mexico, it has been announced at 1,499 pesos. On the screen, you see the reference price in dollars just to give you an idea. But remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. How about joining me to get to know it physically, its functions and other things? As you can see, it is a round format watch. The truth is that it has a very particular design. The rounded frame with a very marked relief can make you like or dislike it depending on each user. But it is definitely a watch that does not go unnoticed. In addition, the most interesting thing is that these bezels are interchangeable. You just have to turn it a little bit to be able to detach it from the body of the device, and subsequently you can attach other bezels, although they are purchased separately. It would have been much more interesting if from the box this watch came with several bezels included to make it a bit more fun, but in this case you have to buy them each separately. On the back we are going to find a simple plastic cover. In this case, it doesn't integrate advanced materials that might give you a little more comfort. And notice that I didn't place the bezel right and it was going to fall off. Let's see, ready? You have to hear a click. Well, let's continue to appreciate the watch from that back, because we are also going to find here a traditional mechanism to release the straps, which in this case apparently come designed in leather, although there are also other editions with silicone. And here on the back is also the name of the brand. The clasp is simple, there is nothing too relevant here, nor will we find sapphire incorporation for the screen, but the button can become something attractive because it is not only a button, but it is also a digital crown. That is, it will not only work to open applications, but you can also slide on this crown and you can switch between the entire list. The truth is that it is very premium feeling that gives this digital crown, as it is accompanied by a vibration motor that is generally simple but is optimized to the maximum to give you this feedback on the wrist when you are turning the digital crown. In this case, the interaction with the buttons is really simple because it doesn't have so many functions as to have options of 2 touches, 3 touches or something like that. Also, it's the only button available, and with a long touch we simply access the power off menu. But as I tell you, it doesn't have more advanced functions in this regard. The thickness of this watch is 13.9 millimeters. The truth is that it is a watch considerably gross, although using a flat bezel you could reach a thickness of 13.6 millimeters, but either way it is still a remarkably thick watch. It weighs 44.4 grams. I must say it's not the most comfortable watch I've used, though it doesn't get to be completely cumbersome either. It offers the IP68 level of water resistance, which can assure you that, for example, you could wash dishes with this watch on without damaging it and the like. Even that, you could accidentally drop it in the water, but it's not really 100% intended for you to wear while you're swimming. For that, it would be better if it had 5 ATM as water resistance, but in this case we are not going to find it. So in this sense, it does give us a much simpler feeling than we expected. For that same reason, we are not going to find any software tool that allows us to expel the water that is stored in the speaker or something similar. So, as I tell you, it comes simple in this aspect, and in addition to this edition that I have in orange, there are options available in gray, both dark and light, and also in a blue color. So I think there's a good variety of options to choose from. The screen has AMOLED technology. Its size is 1.32 inches in diameter and gives us 466 pixels of resolution in diameter. This gives us a pixel density of 353 pixels per inch, which I think is good enough to read small text with good clarity. Fortunately, this screen does have a sensor for automatic brightness. You decide whether you want to turn this option on or off to manipulate the brightness manually as well. It really is a screen with good brightness, peaking at 620 nits, which can be very useful for comfortable outdoor use of this watch. Note that in the display settings, we will also find how long we want it to stay on every time we activate this display. Also, if we want the screen to stay on longer than usual, we can activate a special mode. But we also find the always on display function, which is always welcome. In this case, note that the covers of always on display will be different from the covers that usually brings the clock. In some cases, you could look for a more or less similar or equivalent dial, but note how we will not really be talking about a good transition between the screen on mode and the display that we have with the always on dial. So you do not perceive this same harmonious transition that we would have in other watches. You must specifically select which dial you want to use in this always on display mode. Obviously, there is less variety than the general catalog of dials. Although I insist if you activate some specific dials, maybe you could more or less find their equivalent. But for now, it is not so attractive always on display. It also brings the option to turn the wrist to activate the screen. That's something all watches come with, and this one will be no exception. You could even have the option to double tap the screen to activate it, although this will consume a lot of power, so I don't recommend activating it. We will also find the option that when you receive a notification, the screen is also activated. But again, it will consume a lot of power, so it is not recommended. Let's talk now a little bit about sound features, since in this case it incorporates speaker and also incorporates microphone. But let's start with the music section, because in this case we will only be able to have playback controls available on the wrist. But we will not be able to store music locally, nor does it work as a playback device. So it is exclusively for controlling the music on your cell phone. Note that we can pause or resume the song, go to the next song, and even adjust the volume, and in this case also with a satisfactory response of the digital crown, although it does not seem to react quickly on the interface. But we will notice a change in volume when turning on the crown, specifically when we press this button. If you're alone on the player, it doesn't respond, so I think it could still improve a bit even on the controls. But the fact that it has speaker and microphone is going to be used much more when making calls, since in this case you can both initiate and receive calls directly on your wrist, something that is very convenient and results as a good benefit in this price range. But it does not stop there. You also have access to voice assistant. Although to access this voice assistant you need to access the apps and then scroll down to this section. It would be much more convenient if it could be activated by holding down the button, but that is not available. Notice that once we enter the voice assistant, we can tap to activate and we say the command. How much is 3 times 18? However, note that in this case it doesn't work in a good way, it doesn't react fast, it takes a long time to respond. So it is essential to have unlocked the cell phone so that it can really react to voice assistant commands. And when you're done, in this case, the response is actually being heard on the cell phone and not on the watch. So, even though it has voice assistant, it actually ends up being completely useless. You're not going to take advantage of it. You need to have the cell phone activated, and in that case, it would be easier to search from the cell phone. The same will happen with the GPT chat access, which I actually think is a great idea to have GPT chat directly from the watch. But in order to start using it, it takes a long time to connect, and if you don't have the cell phone with the screen on, it never ends up making the connection. So, again, it's a good idea, but if you're going to have to turn on your cell phone screen, it will be much easier to do the search or query from your cell phone. The idea is good, but the implementation seems very bad to me. In this case, although it has a vibration engine in the y-axis, the truth is that they optimize the resources very well. It is not such an advanced resource, but at least with the digital crown it does feel like a premium vibration. However, when you receive a call or some notification, the vibration is perceived much simpler. Now, join me to see what this watch is capable of monitoring, because for starters, you can have a special graph of the activity you've had. It shows you the steps, the approximate distance. On a graph also, the calories and the activity you've been having. In this case, I haven't been using this watch recently, that's why it looks a bit empty, but that would be more or less the general information. Next, we're also going to find the heart rate monitor. As you notice, also in a graph, it's going to be showing you your current state. with the highest peak, the lowest peak. And something interesting here is also that through the mobile application, you can configure how you want this type of monitoring to behave. If you want it to be at all times, also if you want to have very high heart rate alert when you're at rest, and you can choose what is the range or the limit that you want to have this alert sent to you. The same thing will happen when you have too low heart rate or also too high heart rate when you are in an activity. For example, if you want to exercise but you should not exceed the limits too much, you can also adjust this. So it comes in very well for this type of monitoring. You will also be able to monitor the oxygen in the blood, in this case manually. Every time you want to do a monitoring, you must enter this section. At least this is how it comes by default, but in the settings you can also enable constant monitoring, although this will consume more battery. It will also be able to monitor your sleep. In this case, it shows you the total duration. And if you have reached your goal, it also shows you the naps. And it is able to show you with a graph the deep sleep time, REM sleep, the time you have been awake, or the naps you have been able to take as well. Note that it is also capable of measuring stress, but again you will have to enter a manual measurement unless in the settings you select that you want automatic stress monitoring, but it will also consume more battery. The watch also brings a tool for women so that they can have a control of the cycle, but for that you must first configure everything through the application. Notice that you are going to select your most recent cycle, how long your period usually lasts, and all the necessary information to be able to make the adjustment, and it will be able to predict the next period, but not so accurately because it doesn't really use any temperature sensor or anything additional. So let's say it's a very basic prediction. It also includes a section for breathing exercises in case you want to relax a bit, and it also offers to set reminders to drink water or to stand up, which can also become useful tools if you are creating some important habits. The watch will also be able to give you a score of your activity, so you can more or less tell if you need to be more active for the week or lower the intensity a bit, as you can quickly fill in this little indicator. Also note that it's going to tell us how many minutes we've had low, medium or high intensity throughout the week, so it can help you keep track of your workouts a little more specifically. And speaking of exercise, it obviously has a special section for all this where there are several categories of exercises that you can perform to have a little more specific monitoring. If you want a bigger list, you should access the application, and note that in the application you can change the order of all these exercises or also add some exercises, as it has a very good variety of all of them. In this sense, I think it meets a good quality. Fortunately, you don't have to manually start every exercise, but it also has automatic detection that you can turn on or off. It detects whether you are walking, jogging or cycling. And notice that when we start any of these special exercises, it gives us the indications to have a better monitoring, and then we can start with this countdown. As you can see, it will count the time we are doing exercise, it will show us the heart rate. Also in this case that it is a race, it will show the approximate kilometers we have traveled. We can also slide to access the music player control, and finally slide to stop or pause this monitoring. However, we can't do anything else on the watch without first stopping this exercise monitoring, so it doesn't have advanced multitasking. It also doesn't have its own routine design or anything like that. However, you can configure some things about your goals when you start a specific sport. In this case, it does have GPS to be able to plot your routes when you go for a walk or run. But let's say that the experience is not as advanced as other watches. Although in the price range, I think it can still compete well. On the battery, the manufacturer promises 11 days of normal use and 9 days of heavier use. However, you know that the battery can vary a lot. In fact, it can vary even by the dial you are using and how long you set the screen to stay on. But it's definitely not a watch that you're going to have to charge every day. Interestingly, it also has a power saving mode that would allow you to have 45 days of battery life. But obviously this battery saving mode will only show you the time and you won't be able to do anything else or monitor anything. So it is to use it specifically as a watch, but not as a physical activity monitor or anything like that, because in that case you must exit the power saving mode. The charging of this device will be through pins with a bit of magnetic absorption so you can connect it. In this case, I did the test with a power delivery charger and in 15 minutes it got to 21%, in 30 minutes it got up to 42%, and the full charge finished it in an hour and a half. But you will not have to wait an hour and a half every time you put the watch to charge, because it is recommended that you put it to charge when it has 20% battery, and with a while you charge it, I think it can continue to give you very good autonomy for several days. So I don't consider the battery to be a negative issue with this watch. Even with always on display enabled, you don't need to charge the watch every day. Let's see now the software that has this watch, starting by seeing the available dials. It has a good variety, and some of them can also be customized by changing the color. Note that by turning the crown we will be able to change this setting. There are other dials that will also allow us to modify the functions that have indicators. For example, if you do not want it to show the steps, it could also show other parameters such as calories, battery, and some other things. Although the list is not so large of the parameters that can show you, but if you have customization, all the covers have a quite particular design of nothing, as we are already used to, and in the cell phone we can see more. It is divided into several categories. We will find some of nothing's very characteristic points. We will also find some in digital format, in analog format, some others a little more creative. In general, there are more than 100 covers that we have available, and as I said, all of them with this very particular nothing traditional design. So if you like all the design line of this brand, surely you will also enjoy all these covers. In this case, all the covers are free. It does not have a special store or an alternative store to have more variety. But I consider that the variety of covers that already brings integrated is wide enough to enjoy your experience. This watch also doesn't have any app store to add features to it, so it is limited to what is already installed. As you will notice, it comes with some quick widgets to give you a glimpse of the information. All of them also with the same nothing design highlighting orange tones. In this case, you cannot change or customize the widgets from the watch. However, from the mobile application, you can access this list and you can edit it to change the order of some element if you want it to be at the top. However, these are just the widgets that are already integrated. You can't add more options. Regarding the notifications, note that you will receive them and you can read them easily. You can read them by swiping from the bottom to the top, and as you can see, it also includes this little button so you can have a quick response. These responses can be configured in the application to be able to respond quickly, so you don't need to take out your cell phone. Although it does not show you a more advanced side, so it is a simple answer. Curiously, inside the notifications you see the same answer you sent, so the behavior is a bit strange. Fortunately, it is able to show you common emojis, which are the ones you could use the most, but the uncommon emojis will only appear as a simple box. Obviously, the stickers will not be able to show them either, so it has a somewhat limited performance. Note that also when you receive several messages from the same person, they will appear as a separate notification, and that can create a bit of chaos. And in fact also, if a person is constantly texting you, the watch will not stop vibrating. The experience can become a bit traumatic. There are other watches that can manage these constant notifications better, and when you try to scan the notifications, you will be completely interrupted. Unlike other watches that allow you to be doing another activity while the notification comes up only on half of the screen. Then notice that you then have to go looking one by one at all these messages that you are receiving, and as I say, it can be a bit complicated. One useful tool that is present on this watch is the camera shutter, as it works on any Android device. Although it does not show you the preview, but if it is something positive that you do not need exclusively a cell phone of the same brand. If you have a nothing cell phone, it will automatically open the camera, which is very good, and from here you can shoot the photos or set a timer so that these captures are also made. However, it could still improve if it had a preview or allow us to switch between modes or something like that. But as I say, it is positive that it does work even on phones that are not of the same brand, nothing. And well, the rest of the applications are as expected in any watch, such as accessing the world clock. So have a list of reminders, but you must set it from the phone, so it is not very practical. We will also find the weather forecast, the stopwatch. We will also find a timer with different time presets, or you can add a specific one. Also the alarms that, as you will notice, you can configure as to what days you want it to repeat and at what time, but you are not going to be able to configure the behavior of the vibration or sound. I think that could still be improved. We'll also find the calculator, which in this case works pretty well. It doesn't have a tip calculator or advanced stuff, but for basic use it's fine. We also have access to the calendar for an overview of the whole month, but it doesn't seem to show you your events. And finally, access to the flashlight, which by the way turns on immediately. Although as you see, it first turns on at a soft level and subsequently goes up to full power, then it can help you not get completely dazzled. And with the crown you can also adjust the intensity level, or you can also select a flashing or finally have it turn on red. So I think it's well designed flashlight, and you can even change colors on this flashlight if you want this to be projected in a different color. And finally, you can ring your phone, something that I use every day at least 5 times. And finally, you can see in the settings that it will let us change the view of the applications if we want the list or grid view. Although in grid the labels disappear, so you must learn the icons very well if you want to use it comfortably. We will also be able to configure if we want the clock to behave with complete silence, and also how long we want it to return to the initial screen. In addition, you can activate the Do Not Disturb mode, including a programmed mode, and as you can see in this case, it does have some control gestures that can become attractive. And in this case, for example, you can turn it out quickly to be able to make it react on calls, to be able to answer them, for example. So if you have your hands full and suddenly a call comes in, you can simply turn your wrist, and that simple way you will be able to answer. You can also have these kinds of controls for music or for taking a picture, and you can even select a quick shortcut with these gestures, so it can be useful. And the same thing will happen when you shake your arm, which in this case is trying to quickly do downward gesture, and we have exactly the same controls. It can be very useful, and it is something that usually does not come in other watches, so it could become one of its most attractive points. It also allows us to change the intensity of the vibration motor, automatic workout detection, and basically that's all we can do with this watch. So it seems to me an attractive watch, especially for nothing or CMF users who are used to this type of designs and want a good complement to their cell phone. It brings good options. It is not the most advanced of the market, but it is not the most expensive of the market, so I think it is a worthy competitor. For the moment, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell us, and we'll see you next time.